Right, here we go. Listen up, because what I'm about to tell you is the biggest authoritarian power grab in British history, and it's happening right under our noses. If you do not believe me, you can go onto the Parliamentary Bills webpage, type in data, and read this bill for yourself. Because the data bill is about to pass its third and final reading before receiving royal assent. Once that happens, the UK government will gain unprecedented control over your personal data, financial transactions, business records, and even your biometric identity. So you might want to listen up. There is nothing we can do about this now. This is coming, so prepare yourself. And if you think this is just another boring government bill, you might want to think again. I don't usually ask you this, but my video goes further if you like, favourite it, and repost it by pressing the little arrow in the corner and hitting the little yellow icon. If you think people need to pay attention to this, you might want to repost this video. And I would suggest every single person that does that, because people need to know what's coming. Some of you may have seen my videos previously on this. I have done them endlessly for the last 2 years. Well, it's been updated, and this bill completely overhauls how data is accessed, used, and controlled in Britain, and it will introduce massive government control over personal and business data. Your financial transactions, purchases, service usage, and even customer reviews could be forcibly shared with the government. A digital verification service, trust framework, a government-controlled identity system that centralises digital ID verification, making every aspect of your online presence trackable, and new powers for regulators like the Financial Conduct Authority to force businesses to comply with government mandated data sharing rules, and the removal of Independent Information Commissioner, replacing it with a state-controlled Information Commission, meaning data regulation will be fully dictated by the government. And if you've got this far, sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? Well, we are just getting started, because this bill gives the government the power to force businesses to hand over customer data. Everything from your purchases to your service usage history could be forcibly shared with the state. You understand, right, that a business is every single business. Insurance companies, Google, Amazon, Spotify, you name it. Every transaction you've made will be accessible by them. The setup of an interface body to regulate and track how businesses use data, meaning companies become surveillance arms of the state, and to mandate smart meter compliance, further locking people into digital monitoring for energy use, making energy rationing and price controls easier and possible. But wait a minute. We haven't even got to the worst part yet. They're using your own money to do it, because this bill allows the government to impose financial penalties, levies, and funding structures, ensuring that businesses and ultimately consumers bear the costs of government surveillance. This bill actually lays the legal foundation for digital ID and CBDC. The DVS Trust framework is essentially a digital ID system in disguise. Once implemented, you won't be able to access online services, banking, or even public services without a government-approved digital ID. CBDCs will be the final piece of the puzzle. Once the government can track all your digital transactions under this bill, the next logical step is programmable money controlled by the state. But that's not happening, you say. They can't do that. Yet the Bank of England has an entire webpage dedicated to the digital pound, if you did some reading. In other words, and this gives them the power to, that if you step out of line, say the wrong thing, or hold the wrong opinion, they can cut off your access to banking, services, or even the ability to buy basic necessities. And let's not forget Labour's latest move, if you saw my recent video, that they've just centralised the NHS under full government control. And this means that all health records and medical data will be centralised under state control. Healthcare decisions will be dictated by the central government, not local health boards or doctors, and private healthcare options if they don't align with government-approved policies. So you might ask, what happens when this is linked to digital ID and CBDCs? And this is obviously hypothetical, but if your medical records say you've refused a government-recommended vaccine, restricted access to services, or if your carbon footprint is too high, spending limitations on fuel and travel, if your political views are inconvenient to those in power, or good luck getting a mortgage or a business loan. This isn't a conspiracy. It is here, printed by the government for you to read. It's happening right now. And some of you will turn around and say, how is this actually legal? Simple. They wrote the rules to make it legal in this bill, which actually gives the Secretary of State and the Treasury sweeping powers to create new data regulations without parliamentary approval. Future governments will be able to expand these powers even further without needing a vote, and they will no longer need new laws, as they can just change the regulations whenever they see fit. And this bill isn't making headlines because, you know, MSM, and it's been framed as a data regulation update instead of the largest expansion of government surveillance in history. And since it's not explicitly banning freedoms, people don't see the threat. But in reality, businesses will be forced to comply, services will become inaccessible without state-approved identification, and every financial transaction will be monitored. Using regulations instead of laws, instead of passing an explicit law, they are giving regulators the power to enforce policies without ever needing to go through Parliament again. Regulations can be changed at any time, meaning the government doesn't need your consent to expand its powers later. Businesses will be forced to enforce these policies, meaning resistance becomes nearly impossible. And the bill also states that restrictions on processing and data protection do not apply if done in the interest of national security. You're a far-right extremist. Well, that gives us the power to deem you a national threat and have a look at everything you're doing. Also meaning that GDPR and privacy protections can be overridden at will, and the new state-controlled Information Commission will be responsible for policing itself. So don't expect any legal challenges to stop this. By the way, it's not actually illegal if they change the rules. This is why this is legal, because they wrote the rules to allow it. And they're not going to come to take your freedoms overnight. They are building a system where you have no choice but to comply. Let's be quite frank, no one is being forced to get a digital ID, but without one, you won't be able to access essential services. No one is banning cash, but once everything moves digital, it becomes unusable. And no one is actually making personal data sharing mandatory, but businesses will be forced to comply, leaving you with no alternatives. This isn't about safety, it isn't about progress, it's about control. And once this bill passes, the framework for total government control will be firmly put in place. And it's highly likely digital ID will follow, CBDCs will come next, cashless society, social credit controls, and total surveillance will become the norm. And the worst part, if you actually got here, most people won't realise until it's too late, which it already is. So your next question to me is, what can we do? Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but absolutely nothing. I've spoken about this for over a year. It's a little bit too late now. So why do I bother doing this video? Well, have you ever heard the theory of the boiling frog? It's basically a metaphor suggesting that people may fail to react to gradual yet potentially dangerous changes until it's too late. Similar to a frog slowly being boiled alive in tepid water that is gradually heated. Well, I'm just letting you know that there's a fire underneath the pot we're all sitting in, and it's fully burning now.